Next, let's review some examples of the new transition take foul rule. The defensive player here, Wendell Carter Jr., fouls his opponent, John Collins, immediately after Collins gains possession, but before he has the opportunity to advance the ball. Under the new rule this season, this would be deemed a transition take foul and would be subject to the heightened penalty of one free throw plus possession. The next play in this section will show an example of a defensive foul that would not be ruled a transition take foul. The defensive player, Jetty Osman, makes a legitimate attempt to steal the ball from the dribbler, Jaylen Brown, but in doing so, he makes illegal contact and the defensive foul is correctly called. Please note that since this was a legitimate attempt to play defense and Osman did not give up on the play, this would be ruled a common foul and not a transition take foul. This next example will show a defensive foul that would not be ruled a transition take foul, as the transition scoring opportunity here ended before the foul occurred. We can see that the dribbler, Josh Christopher, momentarily comes to a stop, and he is then fouled by the defensive player, George Hill. Because the foul occurred after the transition scoring opportunity had ended, this would be ruled a common foul and not a transition take foul. Remember, by definition, a transition scoring opportunity only exists when the offensive team is continuously advancing the ball. In contrast to the previous play, this next example will show a defensive foul that was correctly ruled a transition take foul, as the transition scoring opportunity here had not ended when the foul occurred. We can see that the offensive player, Devin Booker, catches the pass and he is continuing to advance the ball when he is then fouled by the defensive player, Terrence Ross. Because the foul occurred before the transition scoring opportunity ended, this would be ruled a transition take foul. The final play in this section will show a defensive foul that would not be ruled a transition take foul. Following the turnover, the highlighted player, Evan Fournier, fouls his opponent, Kyle Anderson, before Anderson gains possession of the loose ball. Since the foul occurs before Anderson gains possession, this would be deemed a loose ball foul and not a transition take foul or a clear path foul. As we detailed going into this season, the NBA has implemented more stringent protocols for bench conduct, specifically in regards to game disruption and/or game distraction. This first example shows the highlighted bench player, Kendrick Nunn, walking out onto the court during live play. The officials correctly assessed an immediate technical foul for this violation. Again, players who are not in the game are not permitted to stand on the playing court at any time for any reason. Another aspect of the bench conduct guidelines involves bench players and/or assistant coaches standing in front of their bench for extended periods of time. Here, we will see two examples back to back of teams committing this type of violation. The officials will first issue a warning, and then, if the bench standing occurs again, a delay of game warning is assessed, and if it then occurs yet again, a second delay of game would be assessed, which would result in a technical foul. All additional occurrences will incur additional delay of game penalties and corresponding technical fouls. In contrast to the previous examples, these next two clips show teams spontaneously standing to celebrate a play on the floor. These are legal reactions, and no penalties would be assessed on the examples shown here. Again, to be clear, bench players and assistant coaches may legally stand up to spontaneously celebrate a play on the floor, but they must then sit back down on the bench within a reasonable amount of time. Our final point of education to review is respect for the game, and we will start the section by showing an example of a reaction that exceeds the respect for the game guidelines. The highlighted player, Nick Richards, commits an overt gesture in resentment to the foul call by waving off in the direction of the official. This type of overt gesture will be met with a technical foul as it exceeds the respect for the game guidelines, whether it is directed towards an official or not. This next play will show another reaction that exceeds the respect for the game guidelines. Here, the highlighted player, Kevin Durant, reacts to the foul call by walking toward the official and clapping repeatedly and overtly at that official. As we know, players are allowed to react to calls with which they disagree, provided the reaction is not overly demonstrative, disrespectful, or prolonged. That is not the case here, however, and a technical foul was correctly assessed. Another example of a reaction that exceeds the respect for the game guidelines can be seen here. After the made basket by his opponent, the highlighted player, Buddy Hield, throws the ball forcefully against the basket support. Players are not allowed to intentionally or forcefully throw or kick the ball against the basket support for any reason. Any violation of this rule will result in a technical foul. This final play will show a reaction that does not exceed the respect for the game guidelines. Following the defensive foul call, the highlighted player, Yuta Watanabe, reacts to the call, but his reaction is not disrespectful and it dissolves almost immediately. As we know, players are allowed to react to calls with which they disagree, provided the reaction is not disrespectful or prolonged. Watanabe's reaction here is a legal heat-of-the-moment reaction, and thus it did not result in a technical foul. We will conclude the video in our usual way, showing a series of examples that show positive interactions between players and officials. The players and the officials shown here maintain their composure and they communicate in a calm and professional manner throughout the interaction. It is our continuing goal that our players and our officials continue to exhibit this type of mutual respect on a night-to-night basis.